Welcome back to WrestleSpective, the channel that continues to bring you videos that make you think, yeah, I guess I'll watch it. You may disagree with this, but Vince McMahon never wanted to be in the wrestling business. He wanted to be in the entertainment business. Vince had a mad drive for success, but he didn't want that success to be solely because of pro wrestling. So for 40 years he failed over and over trying to break into other forms of entertainment, hoping to wash off that pro wrestling stench. Today we're going to take a look at two of those failures. Let's call them his fitness failures: the WBF and IcoPro. It's 1990, and Vince McMahon's WWF is riding high as the undisputed leader in sports entertainment. They're fresh off WrestleMania 6 at a sold-out Sky Dome in Toronto, and Vince is looking to exploit the company's success into a new venture. It's no secret that Vince has always been a fan of large, muscular, vascular men. McMahon's WWF loved the bodybuilder type. He always wanted his wrestlers to be head-turners, guys that would stand out at the airport. Vince was also a big practitioner of pumping iron himself, so it wouldn't really come as a surprise that he would try to squeeze his way into the bodybuilding genre. Vince would do so with the announcement of his own bodybuilding magazine, called Bodybuilding Lifestyles. Although the contest of bodybuilding is incredibly niche, more than wrestling even, bodybuilding magazines actually go back as far as 1898. That's when Eugene Sandow first published his periodical, Physical Culture. Sandow is considered the father of modern bodybuilding, and in fact, the Mr. Olympia statue is modeled after him. Over the decades, bodybuilding evolved, as did its media. Eventually, one name would become synonymous with bodybuilding culture: Weider. Specifically, Joe Weider. Weider was obsessed with fitness and strength from an early age. In 1940, at a mere 20 years old, Joe published his first magazine, Your Physique. The magazine would undergo a couple of name changes until becoming Muscle and Fitness in 1980. That's right, it's a magazine that is still being published to this very day. Weider publications would add several more titles to newsstands. Magazines like Muscle Power, Men's Fitness, Shape, Fit Pregnancy, Flex, and many more. Weider also put out supplements, some of the first on the market. We'd even see them advertised on Herb Abrams' UWF TV.
Hey, you little Mr. Wonderfuls out there, you think Mr. Wonderful got to look like this by eating wimp food like cheeseburgers, french fries, and quiche? Get real. A talented, serious athlete like me needs real nutrition. So I drink Joe Weider's Dynamic Muscle Builder. It's got high-quality protein, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, and other important stuff I need to meet my opponent in the ring. And it tastes great too. And it's just like a thick, rich milkshake. What? You think it's easy being Mr. Wonderful? Well, it's not true. People are always trying to throw me around. And to make sure that doesn't happen, I use Joe Weider's Total Arm Blaster. It's the best way I know to keep my arms pumped and strong.
In 1946, Joe and his brother Ben founded the International Federation of Bodybuilders, the IFBB, and it quickly became the governing agency for bodybuilding. In 1965, the IFBB would hold their first Mr. Olympia competition, the organization's flagship event, the Super Bowl of bodybuilding. And it was at the 1990 Mr. Olympia where Vince McMahon would pull one of the ballsiest stunts of his promoting career. At the event, Vince's Bodybuilding Lifestyles bought a booth for $5,000 to showcase the magazine. It was common practice at Mr. Olympias for there to be vendor spaces to introduce new equipment, magazines, supplements, whatever. But bodybuilding insiders were suspicious of McMahon's intentions. There had been rumors throughout the summer that he was using the magazine as some sort of Trojan horse to start a competitor to the IFBB. That $5,000 also got Vince's magazine some stage time to promote themselves. That's when things got interesting. After the competition had concluded and Lee Haney had been named Best in Show, the magazine got their time at the podium. Bodybuilding lifestyle spokesman Tom Platz, known in the bodybuilding world as the Quad Father for his insane quad development, stepped up to the mic and said, quote, "I have a very important announcement to make. We at Titan Sports are proud to announce the formation of the World Bodybuilding Federation. And we are going to kick the IFBB's ass." Platz had announced a competitor to the IFBB. The fears of the leaders in the bodybuilding community had come true. As Platz was giving his speech, women in evening gowns walked through the aisles, handing out flyers boasting that the WBF would have the richest prize money in the history of the sport. Lee Haney had won $100,000 that year. More than that? Certainly something to think about if you're in that line of work. While this dramatic reveal may have seemed to come out of left field, Vince had already been quietly recruiting competitors from the IFBB since 1989. One of those competitors that was offered to jump ship was Dorian Yates. WBF first became interested in Yates after he finished second in the 1990 IFBB Night of Champions. That second place finish earned him somewhere between $7,000 to $12,000, by the way. Vince pulled out all the stops to try to convince Yates to join the upstart WBF. A first-class flight from his home in England to New York, a tour of the WWF studios in Stamford to show that Titan could do for bodybuilding what they did for wrestling. And the main attraction, a $150,000 a year contract. So that's not just a potential total of what he could make. To me, that sounds like a guarantee of what he will make. Yates was adamant that he'd only consider the offer if the WBF was a legitimate competition. Not predetermined, no gimmicks, no storylines to draw interest, none of the hallmarks of pro wrestling. He was assured it was going to be as honest and fair as a bodybuilding competition can be. That was a life-altering offer for Yates. And this life-altering amounts of money being thrown around to impress and pay the bodybuilders really made a lot of the WWF superstars resentful. As Bret Hart has said in the past, the wrestlers were the ones working the road, taking the bumps, and making Vince money that was then being siphoned off to this new venture. The wrestlers are being told that things are bad financially, and they can see that with their own eyes. But somehow there's money for Vince's pet project. Because the bodybuilding world is so small, competitors that had been approached by McMahon started comparing their deals. One competitor, Sean Ray, who had finished third at the 1990 Mr. Olympia, discovered that he was being offered less than his trainer, Troy Zuccolatto, who had never competed professionally, and it was just because he was larger than Ray. The pitch to Yates, Ray, and others was that they wanted the best of the best. It became apparent to guys that the pay had nothing to do with results of competition, or even current marketability in bodybuilding, but rather who Vince felt had potential to become a star for the WBF. With the uncertainty of WBF's future, potential banishment from the IFBB, concerns over legitimacy, and a desire to win Mr. Olympia, many competitors declined Vince's offer. Sean Ray and Dorian Yates included. The competitors that did join the WBF were revealed at a New York City press conference in January 1991. The 13 competitors included the first-time pro Troy Zuccolatto, 40-year-old nearly retired Danny Padilla, former top 10 IFBB finisher in the 1980s Tony Pearson, recent Mr. Olympia 4th place finisher Mike Christian, and finally, Gary Stridham. Not exactly the best of the best. It's like if during the WWF expansion Vince went to Carolina to get Piper and Steamboat, but came back with Mark Youngblood and Johnny Weaver. No slight to those guys, but not exactly going to help take this new venture to the moon. The WWF 1980s expansion was clearly the blueprint Vince was using here. He was trying to conquer bodybuilding the same way he conquered pro wrestling. Using money, promises of stardom, and how his vision was the future. So get on board, pal! Much like the expansion days, Vince also disparaged the quality of the competition. The post-Mr. Olympia issue of Bodybuilding Lifestyles described the event as mismanaged and poorly judged. In February 1991, the Weeders fired back with an article by Ben Weeder that exposed exactly what the WBF competitors were signing away. Quote, "This contract will expose their desire of total control of the athlete, the removal of all individual professional freedom, and a contract that is so one-sided that any attorney would advise his/her client against signing it. In an interview with Fighting Spirit magazine, Sean Ray confirmed the kind of control the WBF would have over athletes, stating, "In the WBF contract, they own the rights to your name, your likeness, your image, anything you are marketing or selling, including videos, clothing, and 8x10s. You couldn't make any independent appearances, unless it was through the WBF, and they would get the monetary compensation for it, because they owned you." Well, that sounds pretty familiar to us wrestling fans, doesn't it? The Weeders also take a page out of Vince's book by adding some theatrics to that year's Night of Champions event. The show opened with a graveyard set featuring 13 tombstones, adorned with the names of the WBF competitors. Then several IFBB athletes smashed them with sledgehammers. Unfortunately, no one has been able to find any footage or pictures from this portion of the event, which is really devastating. Imagine a Cody throne breaking, but he's like 6 times as large. Hilarious, I love it. The weeks leading up to the inaugural WBF contest would see a promotional blitz on WWF television. We'd see ads for the event, as well as promos from some of the WWF behemoths hyping up the newly christened Body Stars. On June 15th, WBF held their first event in Atlantic City. It would be released on home video and probably didn't do too well. I certainly don't remember seeing it on the shelf at video stores. While many in the bodybuilding community assumed WBF would have all the hallmarks of a WWF presentation, the first WBF championship was actually pretty bare bones compared to your average WWF production. Sure, there were some showgirls, Regis Philbin, and more elaborate entrances that you may see at an IFBB event. Like Jim Quinn had a very Terminator-inspired entrance, but aside from that, the competition was pretty straightforward. However, the show did expose some of the ways WBF, let's say, misrepresented itself. While Vince touted the WBF would have the largest grand prize in bodybuilding at $100,000, what he failed to mention was that the only way to win that money was if your contracted salary was less than that. For instance, the winner of the contest, Gary Stridham, was earning around $400,000 annually. He was the highest paid body star. So he didn't win that additional $100,000. The second place finisher, Mike Christian, just so happened to be the second highest paid body star. And the trend went on down the list. So safe to assume that the competition wasn't exactly judged legitimately. Seems more like Vince justifying their annual salaries. Of course he's the highest paid. He came in first place. Like, imagine if they signed Louis Spicolli for $1 million a year. You really think he'd be losing to Shawn Michaels on Action Zone? Hell no, we'd see Rad Radford in the WrestleMania main event. After the event, bodybuilding journalist Peter McGough reported that, as they had all assumed, WBF was a work. McMahon ran to Dave Meltzer of all people to dispute the accusation and once again state that it was a legitimate contest, and that the Weeders were trying to discredit the WBF. But the most serious threat to the WBF was just around the corner. On June 24, 1991, the federal trial against Dr. George Zahorian began. Zahorian was charged with 14 counts of distributing steroids, some of whom were WWF superstars. Dan Spivey, Rick Martel, Brian Blair, and Roddy Piper all testified that they purchased steroids from Zahorian after the 1988 ban. On June 27th, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Zahorian guilty on 12 of the 14 charges. He would be sentenced to 3 years in prison in order to pay $12,700 in fines. By 2010, he was practicing again in Pennsylvania. Now, I could do a whole video on this trial and Zahorian, but to put it simply, the case was a huge blow to the WWF's reputation. And it was an even bigger blow to the perception of the WBF. Why would anyone think the competitors were all natural after seeing the connection that was made between Zahorian and McMahon? A few weeks later, on July 16th, Vince called a press conference that banned wrestling media and admitted that he had also obtained steroids from Dr. Zahorian for his own personal use. After this revelation, it was announced that Titan Sports would begin testing not just for illicit drugs, but also now steroids. And this included all their stars, both body and super. Later, Vince even informed Meltzer that they would be stricter with the body stars since they knew how to get around the test. To run the testing program, Vince brought in Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale. The hire seemed an odd choice considering Di Pasquale had the reputation for being the guy that could help you beat the test. I guess if anyone could figure out a system without loopholes, it'd be him. WBF also lured Dr. Fred Hatfield away from the Weeders to oversee research and development of nutritional alternatives for the athletes. The hope was whatever he came up with would also be able to be used by the WWF superstars. With the 1992 WBF Championship on the horizon in June, and airing on pay-per-view this time, Vince decided to give this thing a little pizzazz. A little Stanford glitz. More WWF involvement, celebrities, and a TV show on USA Network. In April 1992, the same weekend as WrestleMania 8, WBF launched WBF Body Stars. Great title. Hosted by Vince and Cameo, the show was about health and fitness, food and fun, hanging and banging, riding and sliding, food and fun, and fashion and passion. At least that's what Vince said in the ads. So to put it simply, the show had profiles of the bodybuilders, tips and tricks, and extreme close-ups of oily muscles. The pilot, filmed in 1991, was actually hosted by future Today Show host and sex pest Matt Lauer. Joke is, Lauer was fired because his abs weren't toned enough. But a spokesman told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel in 2002 that Lauer doesn't think he was actually fired because of his abs. Now, WBF having a TV show on a longtime partner like USA sounds great. But it actually wasn't a program on USA Network's lineup. It was airtime that Titan paid for. So was paid programming. Just a really long commercial. WWF pimped the now rebranded WBF magazine and Body Stars on their syndicated shows like Wrestling Challenge and Superstars. There was an episode of Family Feud featuring the WBF Body Stars against some WWF heel superstars. And of course, there had to be a big-name celebrity on the show. So Vince tried to drag Lou Ferrigno out of retirement to be a guest poser at the event. It was Ferrigno's time in the bodybuilding circuit that had gotten him the role of TV's Incredible Hulk back in the 1970s. A lot went wrong with that deal, like Vince promoting it before it was officially signed, so Ferrigno was constantly in and out of the show depending on how the negotiations were going. Eventually, he did sign on the dotted line and was locked in. Until he had a flare-up of carpal tunnel syndrome and had to pull out of the event. Coincidentally, this flare-up was exactly around the time it was revealed that everyone would be tested for roids. Interesting timing. But the beefiest guest poser was still on board. Get on your knees behind that curtain cause it's Lex Luger! The newest WBF signing was revealed at WrestleMania 8 and would even appear on Body Stars to promote the event. Fresh off his WCW championship run, Lex had signed with Titan for WBF to be the face of the brand. And according to Lex, he was taking the spot on the WBF championship show incredibly serious. He said in multiple interviews that he was working hard in the gym, changed his diet, and was in the best shape of his life in terms of mass and definition. Lex was ready, but the universe had other plans. Just days before the show, Lex was in a horrific motorcycle accident that broke his arm. Luger was now out too. Well, this event is quickly falling apart. But Vince has to have done enough promotion to pull it off in the end, right? Right? The 1992 WBF Championship was unmistakably a Vince McMahon production. Much more so than the inaugural event. Mean Gene was our host while Vince and Tom Platz were joined on commentary by Bobby the Brain Heenan. The nicknames from the 1991 event had devolved into outright gimmicks, complete with sketches before their poses. Like, they were so bad they probably wouldn't have even made air on Tuesday Night Titans or Primetime. The competition was not received well by those in the bodybuilding community. Many commenters pointed out how bad some of the competitors looked compared to their IFBB days. I don't see it. All I see is a monstrous human being, so clearly this isn't something I have an eye for noticing. Now, there's a couple of factors going into the Body Stars not exactly looking their best. Number one was the lack of competitions the WBF held. The organization only held its championship events, so only one show a year. So competitors would have a whole year to prepare. So there's more of a chance to slack off. The IFBB, however, held multiple events throughout the year. I'd imagine that keeps athletes motivated to look their absolute best at all times as much as possible. And less likely for all competitors, but still important to mention, was that it seems some were going on and off the juice, which can't be great for consistency. Anyway, the show bombed on pay-per-view. Only around 3,000 homes saw Gary Stridham repeat as the winner. That had to be a major blow to Vince's ego. An absolute embarrassment. Let's put it like this. The WWF's worst year of business under Vince was 1995, according to pretty much everyone, right? Okay, the lowest buy rate for a pay-per-view that year? In Your House 5 Seasons Beatings with 80,000 buys. WBF on pay-per-view did the worst of the worst on what was maybe Vince's biggest revenue source. It was so bad that many cable providers dropped the show due to low pre-orders. You can spin the sales of a home video, especially if you're a private company, but buy rates don't lie. It could not be more obvious now. WWF fans did not want the WBF. Bodybuilding fans did not want the WBF. The general public, people who were not fans of either niche, did not want the WBF. The 1992 WBF Championship would be the last WBF Championship, and the last WBF event, period. Shortly after, the WBF magazine would fold, with Vince saying via press release that he hoped the magazine shutting down would lead to a more collaborative relationship with the bodybuilding industry going forward. It didn't. Body Stars would limp along for a few more weeks until it too came to an end. Fittingly enough, the episode featured the WBF Body Stars losing a tug-of-war to some WWF heels. Highlight being Bill Alfonso in shorts and blowing a whistle, pre-ECW. The ex-Body Stars that were let back into the IFBB were only able to do so after paying some hefty fines. They were also no longer featured in the Weeder magazines that dominated the industry. Many lost endorsements and personal appearance opportunities, costing them tons of non-competition money. Things probably weren't that bad for them though. According to the Hitman, they still got paid those big bucks even though it went belly up. The WBF may have been an absolute disaster, but Vince wasn't entirely out of the fitness world just yet. Remember Fred Hatfield from earlier, the head of WBF Research and Development? Well, one of the other goals Titan had for that department was also researching how the nutritional alternatives Hatfield developed for the WBF could also be used by the average Joe. Vince wanted to also compete with the Weeders in the supplement game. So with that goal of getting something on store shelves, Hatfield created the Integrated Conditioning Program, or as it would become known, ICOPRO. ICOPRO launched in the spring of 1992 alongside WBF Body Stars. If you were watching WWF TV at the time, you couldn't escape it. Wrestlers would be seen in ICOPRO tank tops, they had ads for it in the magazines, mentions of it on commentary, and obviously, ICOPRO ads bombarded episodes of Superstars. As a kid, the commercials really made me think that this stuff would make me big and strong. Gary Stridham glistening while pumping a dumbbell that to me had to weigh 1,000 pounds. The setting also gave off that "we work hard, we play hard" vibe. Later in its life in 1993, you'd see a giant ICOPRO banner on Monday Night Raw. When speaking with Fighting Spirit magazine about ICOPRO, Hatfield remarked, "I was quite proud of ICOPRO, and I still am. Bodybuilders didn't like it, they like juice. The athletes in general didn't like it because they knew that steroids work remarkably well at helping people recover from intense training. The ICOPRO product line was designed to work in unison. It wasn't just a protein powder, or a pre-workout, or a muscle builder. It was everything. It was a program. And according to Bruce Pritchard, it needed to all be done at a particular part of a workout. It wasn't exactly convenient. Also, according to Bruce, the protein bars were pretty good. But Brett said it all tastes like shit. Always trust Brett."
They sent crates of it to my house. Worst stuff. I mean, I honestly, I don't think it had any value to it at all. It didn't taste good. It was awful. And most of the wrestlers, you could get it for free, but we all had our own stuff. We all bought our own personal stuff, and I had it stacked up, and I'd give it to the neighbors and stuff like that.
Neighbor's dog.
And they wouldn't take it. They'd leave it back and put it on your step.
So that's the commercial for IcoPro.
IcoPro had taken on the Body Stars catchphrase of, "You've gotta want it." Well, no one did. IcoPro would also go the way of the dodo some point in 1993. The belief among many is that if IcoPro did lose money, it didn't lose nearly as much as the WBF. Again, Bruce Pritchard commented that IcoPro probably broke even. But if you're like me and you have a nostalgic fondness for IcoPro, there's plenty of online stores out there with IcoPro branded stuff for you to buy. Also, there appears to be a new IcoPro for our European friends. But the trademark for the IcoPro we're familiar with seems to have been abandoned in 2000 according to Trademarkia. Do with that information what you will, Internet. And that's the story of Vince's forays into the fitness world?
What about me?
Christian Bale's Batman?
No, me. The game. The King of Kings. Papa H.
Ew, gross, don't call yourself that. Alright, fine, we'll talk about you and your foray into the fitness world. So the failure of IcoPro wasn't entirely the end of the WWE trying to wedge its way into the fitness world. In 2014, WWE, with the help of Lionsgate, introduced the Power and Fit video series, hosted by Triple H and Stephanie McMahon H, respectively. The DVDs featured the corporate couple leading workouts designed for them by their personal trainer Joe DeFranco. DeFranco, over the last 20 years, has become one of the most sought-after strength and conditioning coaches, working with Major League ball players, college and Olympic athletes, UFC fighters, NFL players, and obviously, WWE superstars. The DVDs are exactly what you'd expect if you've ever seen a workout video. Trips are stuffed front and center with people behind them demonstrating the exercise and any modifications. But most of these extras aren't just folks DeFranco pulled off a chest press at Planet Fitness. These are members of the 2013-2014 NXT roster. On Triple H's Power Series video, we can spot Jason Jordan, Sean Spears, and LA Knight back in his days as Slate Randall, which is an absolutely terrible name. And on Stephanie's Fit Series video, we see Alexa Bliss, and I believe this is Dana Brooke. Let me know in the comments who else you can see. I'm sure I missed someone obvious. I assume WWE saw the success DDP was having with his yoga programs and decided they could get in on the action. But it's been a decade and each series only has one entry, so I think it's also safe to assume that they didn't sell nearly well enough to warrant the series continuing. Allegedly, the budget for them was about $100,000. And given that everything was pretty much done in-house, the extras are WWE talent, they were filmed at the Performance Center, it makes sense that they didn't break the bank to produce them. But if you're curious, some of the workouts are available on YouTube, and you can pick up the DVDs on Amazon for $5. And that concludes our look back at WWE's 3 failed attempts to break into the fitness world. I'm surprised they haven't attempted anything with an app yet. Who knows, maybe I'm predicting the future here. As always, please leave your thoughts on any of this in the comments, and feel free to make any other topic suggestions. I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Watch wrestling, love wrestling, thanks for watching.